So we are now live. Let me just find out where my bell is. Frank, as soon as I have a respect. Great, no problem.
So, yes and no. The idea is you can do what you want to, but Anthony will be touching Twitter, I'll add whatever. I will also sort of shoot this and how to do this, that's what I want to do. And then they'll also have to it can be kind of complex. No.
Yeah, so with that frame, right, it's going to sit right here. Okay. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead. It's a little loud, right? We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Blake Rowley. I work for the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors. And welcome to the Twitter Town Hall for this event, SOS, Saving Ourselves. First, we're going to start, before we launch into the actual Town Hall, we have a message from Gilead, one of the sponsors of the event. And they want to show us something that's new and exciting, and hopefully will engage you all about HIV in a completely different way.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi again, everybody. Bill Leiser, Community Liaison with Gilead Sciences. So glad to see you all here this evening. At the center of each of your tables is a flyer. It's also in your program brochure, letting you know about a new app available. It's available now for iOS and Android, called HIV Answers. And it is designed as a sort of one-stop shop for questions related to HIV. Really designed as a tool to help work and get individuals engaged in care. And so for just a minute, as we begin our town hall this evening, looking at how we use social and technological aspects to engage in care, we're going to do a quick walkthrough of what that app actually looks like. If you want to, you can download it for free from the iOS or Google Play Store as we speak, if you'd like to follow along. We'll also have some more information at our booth just next door if you want to check that out. So if you can see the screen, this is basically what it would look like when you pull it up. The first option you get there is the ability to choose if you would like a password. So you can actually keep it completely secure so individuals aren't going to be looking at that information. The actual title of the app, it just says Answers. So if somebody's looking at your phone, you're not automatically seeing the word HIV pop up. You know, sensitivity is definitely something that's been important as part of this design. So once you jump in, as you can see, basically it just pops up with different thoughts related to HIV. And essentially you can just find the one that gravitates to a particular moment for you. So for instance, let's say this one right here talking about, I don't want people to find out I have HIV. So an individual can click that and it'll essentially walk them through some tools, some conversation guides, letting them know, you know, this is your choice, how you disclose, what that means for you. It takes them through some places where they can get some resources. And ultimately, it takes them to a place where they can actually find service organizations in their area to be able to link to agencies wherever they are that can help directly with that care. So for each of those areas under the Get Answers, individuals can find those types of topics there. The second tab is the Starting Treatment tab, and essentially it walks through the steps to engage and retain in care. So for individuals who are living with HIV, it gives them the ability, for instance, to find a doctor. Learning about, well, what does that mean to have that relationship with my provider? Some questions and some thoughts about connecting to medical care. Again, links to resources that are local to where those individuals are. It walks them through finding the right treatment, making an appointment, and finally keeping going, working on that adherence piece. The third tab over shows you the kind of talking to your doctor interface. It's actually kind of fun. So what it does is it walks through a series of questions that an individual may have that they would want to talk with their provider. What's really cool about it, though, is you can actually click Edit and go through, and let's say side effects is not something I have a question about, or some of these other issues, I can tap so that when I'm done, the only questions that will be left are the ones that I actually want to talk to my provider about. So I don't have to worry about having a bunch of extra things on the screen as I'm flipping through. And that last section there, the Keep Track section, this is for the place where you can keep everything you need to remember about connecting to care. Who is my doctor? Who's my pharmacy? Where's my insurance or my emergency contact information? Again, all of that stays local to the app. It can all be locked down, password protected, so that that information is available and ready to use. This app is available for free in the iOS store as well as the Google Play Store. It's also a website, so if someone doesn't have a mobile device and wants to go, they can just go to HIV Answers. All of that information. There's links to video resources, testimonials from individuals living with HIV sharing from their experience. The flyers at the middle of the table are for you to take with you, to pass out to friends, to family, to clients, to individuals at your agencies. We also have more materials at the booth. Feel free to grab them. Check it out. Live with the app a little this weekend. We're actually sponsoring a plenary lunch tomorrow at, I think, 12:30, and we'll be able to highlight some more new resources for you then. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll turn it back to the town hall.
Thank you so much. So before I sort of deep dive into this, I do want to all let you know that this town hall is sponsored by Speak Out, or Greater Than AIDS, and Speak Out is an offshoot of Greater Than AIDS. And there's a hashtag for this town hall. It's called #SpeakOutHIV. So please make sure you hashtag comments you hear, questions you have to that. And also, AIDS Healthcare Foundation has launched this campaign starting yesterday. Also, what they want me to let you know is that Speak Out, they're accepting applications for Speak Out Youth Ambassadors. Greater Than AIDS, along with NASTAD, AIDS United, Black AIDS Institute, invite and encourage young gay men and other heterosexual men to participate in a Speak Out Youth workshop. I will tweet sort of what the bit.ly link is during the session at some point. The deadline is June 10th, so if you want to get involved, tell your story, that will be a way for you to do it. Before I also talk about some other things, I want to give the mics to the four beautiful individuals who are sitting next to me. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves and why they're here, and then they'll tell you what their Twitter handles are. Also, my Twitter handle is BROWPHD, since I'll be getting that in the future. You can ask my permission to follow me in the future, and then these four individuals will go ahead.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Dykes. I am here representing New Phi Zeta Fraternity Incorporated. I'm the founder of their organization. I am a sophomore in college right now, and ultimately my goal is to make a difference for those who come behind me. And my Twitter handle is _Young, YOUNG, King with 2 I's.
Good evening. My name is Darwin Thompson, Director of Programs at NASM Inc. I'm here because I was asked to be here, and I gratefully accepted. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Blue Swag, that's BLU, because I remember Phi Beta Sigma, Swag 5, because that's my number.
My name is Antoine Maxwell. I'm a native of Memphis, Tennessee. I currently reside in Chicago, Illinois. So I would never have missed an opportunity like this for SOS here in the South, for the Radio Foundation to start galvanizing youth in the South. Black gay youth is, I think, worthy of support, both nationally and federally. And I wouldn't miss this for the world. My Twitter handle is my name. Instagram, Facebook is Antoine Maxwell. It's Antoine spelled right. Antoine. And then Maxwell just like the coffee or the singer.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Ball. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and I work in human resources for an automotive manufacturing company. I'm actually here because Marvell extended the invitation for me to participate. I've been active in the field through the Career Fellowship Program. I'm a former fellow of the organization, and I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Wonderful. So a little bit more about Speak Out. It's a campaign that's designed really to engage the LGBT community in a response to HIV and confront the silence and stigma that surrounds HIV. And so using the tagline, let's bring HIV out of the closet, it's about speaking out about what's happening in our community, but not what's always said. So why are we silent when we talk about HIV? Why do we whisper when we have these conversations sexually, interpersonally, with our friends, etc.? And through targeted media messages and community outreach, Speak Out encourages more open communication and relationships with your healthcare providers and with the community writ large. So whether you're positive, whether you're HIV negative, whether you're HIV neutral, everyone has a role to play in combating the epidemic. So again, as I said, engage on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram using hashtag SpeakOutHIV, post photos that you take, and whatnot. I won't belabor you all with the data of the epidemic. We all know where we fall sort of in relationship to the cascade, in relationship to epi numbers that were released in 2011, and things that we constantly hear. But now we have a sort of modified toolkit in our hands. We have treatment as prevention. We know for a fact that when you get people virally suppressed, that they have a significantly lower chance of reducing HIV infection to their HIV, or reducing HIV transmission to their negative partners. We know that PrEP works, pre-exposure prophylaxis, the idea of using Truvada, a once-a-day HIV medication for HIV prevention. We know that this works, and so when people use this consistently and as prescribed, they have significant chances of reducing HIV infection to their partners. We know that condoms work, and we have to figure out how do we resexualize condoms, how do we talk about sex and HIV and everything sort of in the context of our lives holistically. And so now it's time for us to bring all of these tools together and sort of all of the knowledge and information that we have and figure out how are we going to, in the epidemic, particularly for young black men. And right now we know that that epidemic is currently centered primarily in the South, and so a lot of our work needs to be focused on the South, and that's also partially why you see 4 gentlemen who are living currently in the South. So your responsibility, not only in terms of asking questions on Twitter, is also to ask questions in person. So I encouraged you all earlier to speak up. You all have something to say. Raise your hand. I will take questions from Twitter. I will take questions from the audience. I will take questions from the panel to you all, because we really want you all to engage in sort of the widest way possible. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. Ask whatever you want to know. If it's about coming out, about your status, how people did it. Let's talk. So Anthony, our social media team is Anthony Roberts Jr. and Frank, I'm forgetting your last name? Dorsey the second. They will be managing our Twitter, and you will eventually be able to see the tweets that you all have all down from here. And so you can laugh and giggle as much as you want. Anthony, are there any current questions from the Twitter or in the audience? And so the first question that I'm having is, how are you supposed to talk about HIV in the context of intimacy? Who would like to tackle that?
So tomorrow I'm actually doing a presentation here called Kama Sutra, very similar to the word Kama Sutra, looking to have the conversation around how do you make prevention still sexy and still safe in some way. For me, HIV disclosure or just bringing up status always is like this downer. And I have to find ways to navigate it when I disclose that I would hope will keep the sexual energy in the room. But I found it at times that it doesn't. And then a person is in a learning curve and needs to have some more conversation. So for me, bringing up my status is me opening up our relationship for dialogue because I don't know the outcome. But to connect it to intimacy, my experience has been most of my boyfriends have been negative. I've been HIV positive just for the sake. For 30 years now, I was infected 2 days after birth via blood transfusion. So I grew up with HIV. I did a lot of public speaking and a lot of advocating here in Memphis. And it was really hard being a young person with HIV and then having to disclose and not having the tools to do that. Maybe later we'll come back to that. But I just think the intimacy is a different conversation than me just saying we're here to fuck. And once we open that door to disclose or have that conversation, we open up ourselves to a different level of vulnerability.
So I'm gonna push that envelope a little further and think about as we talk about social media or sort of social networking and things like Jack, Grindr, Adam for Adam, Scrub, etc. How do we talk about HIV in those contexts? And when they come up, like what do we do when we figure out our potential partner is positive or that I'm having some difficulty talking about my status to a partner? How do we respond?
I mean, I think that when you're in that context, when you think about those social networking sites, I necessarily don't feel like there should be some type of disclosure in that, especially if it's just a hookup. So we have to define the type of relationship that we have with individuals before we disclose our status. Because at the end of the day, if it's just a fuck, that's just what it is. And I may not ever want to talk to you again as long as I'm protecting myself, then, there may not be a need to know.
I think that with using those resources for hookups or whatever you may call it, even if you decide to have those conversations with the potential partner, it is very difficult for you to determine whether or not they're telling the truth. Some people may lie about their status. Some people may say, yeah, I'm clean or I get tested, but they may just say these things for the sake of not ruining the mood or not, damaging their opportunity of a potential hookup. So I think that even though some people may touch the surface by saying, oh, I'm looking for someone who's gluten-free, or, I'm looking for a non-smoker, or may ask when the last time you've been tested, even though they may give you an answer, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the truth. So I would say that regardless of what someone may say their status is, it's always better to just protect yourself because you never really know.
So I think that when it comes down to a person's status in general, although I know it's hard, I think that they should disclose that information to the individuals that they want to have an encounter with, primarily because I feel like you're doing a discredit to the individual for not telling them. Although I feel like they deserve to know if you're going to have a sexual encounter with them because it's a risk factor for them. And from there, they can make the decision whether or not they want to continue and have it or do it. I think people should, if you have it, I know it's probably hard to deal with, but I know personally if I had it and I didn't tell someone I had it and had sex with them, I would feel worse knowing that if I possibly give it to them versus they knew when we had an encounter.
Go ahead. Go respond to that.
So a couple things. One thing really shortly. My recent experience is I have a lot of experience where people live vicariously through you when you're open about your HIV status. So other positive people won't disclose to other positive people because it's like only one of us has to do it. And another situation that I recently had was a guy came over, we're sitting around talking, we finna have sex, and so there was no conversation about condom negotiation, and so I'm sitting there in my head with a condom in my mouth because I'm real crazy, and I like to experiment. And I got a condom in my mouth. I'm like, because if I do it, I'm already prepared for it. Well, he doesn't know that, and so he starts to try to sit down on my big penis or whatever, and I said, hold on. I said, well, let's put a condom on. I said, well, let's talk about this. I haven't disclosed yet. And I'm using this to answer your question, kind of, or your thought, to support it. And I said, well, I hadn't disclosed him yet. So I was like, let me have this conversation, because for me, it is important for me to have that conversation. But then I said, okay, I need to tell you something. So here I am. I flip him over, lay him on his back. I said, okay, let me try to make this sexy, rub his hair while I'm talking to him, and then I say the thing that opens the door for every conversation, right? I got something to tell you. And I said, oh, I'm positive. And then I go through my little story or whatever, and he said, it's good, it's cool. You cool, bro. You cool. Me too. And then I got offended. I was going to re-affect me, because he wasn't going to disclose to me. For me, it was a conscious thing that I chose to do. Disclosure is really complicated, and I think that that's what we have to always remember, that some people use legislation to justify how they disclose. So some states have laws that say if you disclose and you use condoms, you don't have to. You don't have to. Some states say even if you use condoms, you don't tell nobody. If it's just intimate contact, we put you in jail if we find out. Blah 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 blah. I try to treat humanity right. I use my own moral compass to be the judge for that, and not law, not the preferred idea. And I know it's hard. It's taken years. I've been living with HIV 30 years. It took me 20 of those years to become this. It's taken decades to learn how to disclose so easily. And then even now, it still hurts. So.
Thank you. That's a sort of really great segue into the next question that I have from Twitter. And you sort of already answered it, but the question is, in what ways do you speak out about HIV? So not necessarily about being positive or negative, but how do you talk about it with your friends, with your family, with your partners? Antoine, you sort of already answered that question, but any other panelists want to answer how they talk about it?
Well, it's not as easy for me to discuss it simply because in Mississippi that's not socially acceptable. But lately I found myself being more brave and starting at home with my family, the people I feel most comfortable with. A lot of times when I do see my family or we get together, they're always asking, well, you know, what are you up to? How's your life going and everything? And I start to tell them about different activities I'm involved in, such as the Symposium. And that kind of opened doors for me to kind of inform them a little bit about, you know, the field and what I study and how I contribute, because my initial experience in this field and passion for this field came from my mother being diagnosed with it and me having to experience life seeing her handle this situation. So even though it's secondary, I kind of use that to open conversations with my family or my friends, even with people at work. I mean, sometimes it's not as easy because not as many people are open to having these conversations, or they're not comfortable with it because certain stigmas and everything. But I just kind of push the envelope, you know, and sometimes you will really help them to see that it's not always talked about in the negative aspect, you know, and it is a lot of benefit from having these conversations and discussing it with each other.
Really quickly, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I went to YouTube. You can look me up on YouTube, Antoine Maxwell, and I did a video, and that was the beginning of me speaking out. I did a video talking about all my hurts, all my pains, me living with HIV, and everybody in my family. My grandma didn't even know how to turn on a computer, was watching YouTube. And it was a conversation that I didn't prepare people for. I just did it because I was so angry at the pressure of the world saying I had to keep hiding. And so I just said, you know, I'm tired. And I just started talking about it. So sometimes you do it because you're angry.
I think for me, I think one of the things when I started this field way back when I got an undergrad was I was known as the condom boy, that person that was always in the club putting on condoms. And so people have always known, they said, well, why are you doing this? And I said, you know, it's part of, you know, my job. I work in HIV prevention. So now it's in my role now, people still like talk to me, my friends, my uncles, my mom, they always talk to me about like new technologies. And so it seems like I have like 4, 5, 6 conversations, whether it's my friends or anybody, about HIV a day, whether people come to my office, on the phone. And it's like, it's so second nature now to be like, hey, get tested. When my friends talk to me about their sexual experiences, hey, did you use a condom? If not, when the last time you been tested? Those types of things. So I think that one of the ways that we have to do is just make it second nature. It's so routine now. So because it's part of my daily routine, that is not a problem for me.
I would say one of the ways that I have a conversation about it is when I learn new information, I go out and tell my friends and my family and stuff like that. Like when I found out about Truvada and PrEP and different things like that, going out to tell them about that and digging in deeper into it when they ask different questions. I know that typically during special occasions, Christmas or birthdays and stuff, I always send my friends condoms. And I feel like it's just the easiest gift in the world to give them. And I know they're having sex. So it's like, oh, do you have some more? Do you need some? Call me when you need some. Because it's not that, well, there's not a lot of places that I know that they would go get them besides buying them. And if I can get them in Atlanta so much for free, it's like I'm helping them out. And asking them when did they get tested and telling them that you can go get $30 from the HIV testing center if you go get tested. Or tell people to go do that, to offer them some type of incentive to stay connected and keep getting tested.
So picking up on this HIV criminalization issue that Antoine picked up, how do we even expect people to come out about their status when in so many states, doing that and having sex with another HIV negative individual or not disclosing your status can send you to jail? How do we, not honestly force people, but how do we encourage that safe space to talk about it and remove the stigma around what that means by having HIV coming out?
I think one of the things that, I tell my clients, I tell people all the time is that if you're HIV positive and you disclose your status and someone tells you no, guess what? People will sleep with you. So if disclosing your status is about sexual relations and someone's going to say no because you're positive, you can find someone else 20 minutes later and they'll be like, okay, it's cool. So I think that once you're comfortable with yourself and you've accepted it, and once you've accepted it and people don't accept it for you, I think you just move on. I think that at the end of the day, what what individuals have to do first is accept it themselves so they can disclose, and then I think they'll be fine.
I think what Darwin said is really great, but at the end of the day, it's not always about just hooking up. People don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to feel exposed. So even if you disclose your status to someone and tell them you're HIV positive, and they say no, that's one thing. But if they say no, and then they go tell their friends, oh, he's positive, he told me he was positive, and they go tell their friends, and they go tell their friends, and it's spreading like wildfire now. And that's one reason why people don't tell their statuses or aren't very open with their statuses, whether it's with their families, whether it's with people they work with or their intimate partners, is because they're always afraid that at the end of the day it's going to get out and it's going to make them handling that situation even worse. So I don't think it's always about intimacy. A lot of times it's about security. It's about being emotionally stable and not feeling like you are being stigmatized or looked at differently or treated any differently because of the situation.
So on a grassroots level, I think as Black gay men, we have to take a different approach with advocacy when we're talking about changing legislation. That's a very hard concept, I think, overall for the Black community, because some of us are into politics and some of us aren't. But what it does say when you start talking about changing those criminalization laws is that there's a need to educate everyone, specifically our community stakeholders, our political figures. We need to find a way to disseminate the biomedical information to the people that are completely illiterate but have some form of community power. And that's what we forget, that even though they have positions of power, they have low health literacy. So you have pastors now telling people like the Affordable Care Act is the mark of the beast. because we have to find a way to disseminate and also go through those layers of historical trauma for the African American community when you talk about the medicalization of HIV or the Tuskegee experiment or all these different experiences of our culture and why we push back whenever anybody brings up anything with health. I just think we have to go back to that strategy on really trying to increase health literacy. Okay.
So we've had a couple questions on Twitter. I want to know if there's anyone in the audience who has a question, and let's take a couple, maybe two from people. If you have a question, just sort of raise your hand and say what you need to say. Is that a hand right there in the back of that seat, sort of scratching your face? No? No? And can you say your name? Yeah, right.
My name is Noel. I'm from DC. One of the questions I was asking is, given that you all work in HIV prevention professionally, do you all hold yourself to a higher standard when it comes to practicing safer sex or sex with condoms, or do you allow yourself to forgive yourself when you make one?
So, I'm gonna answer that as an I statement. It's easier for me to justify my decisions based on my breadth of knowledge. So, as someone who uses PrEP, I sort of made the decision a long time ago around what I was going to do and not going to do in relationship to condoms. And sort of what I wanted to feel when I was with someone else. Working in the field, I think there's an internal stigma that I feel as well as an external stigma, but it doesn't. Like I don't go through the mental gymnastics of forgiving myself because what I choose to do is what I choose to do, and I've accepted it before I've even gotten into it.
I think number one, that question is really, really heavy. As another I statement, I think for me, piggybacking off what Blake said, I've been in this field since 2008 and I understand the risk factors. However, one of the things that I tell my clients and one of the things that I've internalized myself is, as a Black gay man, I enjoy having condomless sex. And so because I enjoy having it and I understand the risk factors, I have those conversations with my partners. That's what I'm going to do. And working in prevention, I have the tools necessary to, to swab. I mean, for lack of a better term, if we're really going to engage in unprotected sex, let's take a test together. Or the fact that I was in a serious core relationship and my partner was positive, understand his viral loads, understand those types of things, and making an informed decision. Because I know risk, I think it's about making informed decisions.
So the pressure of being an advocate, of working in social service, of having to fuck and feed in the same community, right? So sometimes I'm fucking you and sometimes I'm feeding you with information and literature. It's a complicated relationship, and we all have to dance it on terms that are about making sure our clients, which we never touch, you should never touch, as well as our community doesn't become distracted by us. Because a lot of pressure is put on Black gay men in social service. We're like monkeys. We're like the poster child. We're sometimes used for our gayness, for our Blackness in our HIV status to make a grant right. That's not fair. Sometimes there's an exploitation that happens when Black gay men put their Blackness and their gayness up for everybody to scrutinize. It's a very familiar concept when we talk about the wounded healer and people who have to heal people but also have to be wounded with the people they're healing. It's really hard. It's really hard. And I sometimes have to let go of my own expectations because I'm not my client. I don't need no one to save me. I'm not looking up for a mentor right now. So I have to adjust my own expectations about myself so that if I do choose to have condomless sex, I do it on my terms. No different from heterosexual people who've been doing it on their terms forever. And nobody ever questioned why you got 13 kids. They say because that's what you're supposed to do. So I think we have to, one, mystify sexual relationships between men. They're not taboo, they're not new, they've been going on since people have been able to walk on two legs. Sometimes they were ritualistic, sometimes they were communal, sometimes they were about a rite of passage. And I think we just have to find a way to disseminate to the community the message that matters, as well as for them how to navigate when someone asks what you ask us. Because people ask them the same thing. We have to prepare them to say, can you forgive yourself if you become infected? And I'm going to end with this. One of the things that broke my heart the most over my 15 years working in HIV is when my friends came back positive. That would always stab me to my core because they watched me grow up living with HIV and being alienated and going through a lot of emotional turmoil and depression. And then when my friends would come back positive, I'd be like, how dare you? Or how dare you die from AIDS? How dare you? And then I found myself having to adjust my expectations for them, just like I do for myself. They're human.
I would say that when it comes down to expectations, I would say that I mentally thinking about my family and their history, I have a aggressive personality, and I've worked on making sure that I keep people's thoughts and opinions open and try to be as unbiased as possible, being in different leadership roles. So as I talk to people and inform individuals on different things, I will give them my perspective of some things, but also keeping the door open so that a person is still allowed to make their own decisions and not feel that I am pressuring them to do something. And if they don't make the decision that I decided was right for them or that they should do, that they don't feel like they have to run or they have to hide, or it's like, well, I messed up or I did it anyway, or it's like, okay, well, that's the decision that they're going to have to live with. It's like I have my own expectations and they have theirs. It's like, I'll tell you what I think and you can either take it or leave it. At the end of the day, it's your life, not mine.
Are there any other questions from the audience that are burning right now? So I have, we do? Go.
So do you think,
Your name?
James, or Jimmy, either one works for me. Do you think that ending stigma, the way to end stigma would be to push education or push a mental or a mind transformation?
So is the way to end stigma to push education or a mental or a mind, what was the last word? Transformation.
I would say more so mental wellness, primarily because one of my fraternity brothers, the way he talked about it so much, he says that he kind of hates that in our community we talk so much just about AIDS and HIV and things of that nature, but there's more to us than just those things. And if we can wrap around trying to better ourselves as a whole, mentally and physically, then we could get rid of that stigma, because I can't think about, or I don't really care about my HIV status and all that if I don't have a job, if I can't get to work, if I'm struggling in my personal life. It's like that's on the back burner for me. Right now, I'm trying to figure out how am I going to stay alive. If HIV is not killing me right now, it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to eat, or am I going to go buy my medicine? Because I'm still trying to just survive right now.
I think that, in my opinion, I think that one of the things we have to do is continue to educate around HIV. I think that the one thing that we need to do better is create messages for different communities, whether it's the faith-based community, whether it's the PEG community, the bear community, those types of things. I think we need to create tailored messages for them around HIV, because I think that the message still isn't getting out. As much prevention as we're doing within the communities, we're still not educating communities who we are, other communities who we're involved in. I go to church all the time, and so there are messages that just aren't in church, or there's still some stigma or some misinformation in church, and I think that if we tailor those messages that way, then we'll decrease stigma that way.
Well, I honestly feel that we have to cater to people's mental health It's no mystery that we all know condoms protect you from STDs and HIV, but just because we're knowledgeable about something doesn't necessarily mean that we take the initiative to enforce that knowledge, or we take that initiative to make these decisions to protect ourselves. I mean, I'm sure the majority of us in here know the risks of having unprotected sex, but that doesn't mean that we've never indulged in unprotected sex before. It doesn't mean that we don't know. It's just we have to kind of target that thought process of what are we considering when we make these decisions when we don't do it.
So we stand in a real new place in history, right? And time has a way of changing everything. Today, stigma may look like homophobia. And 50 years ago, it looked like feminism and the war against women. And then 100 years before that, it was slavery and the impact of the racial constructions of race, class, gender. You know, we saw those things play out. And over time, things have slowly started to change. I think that's, you know, I kind of hated it when Oprah said that comment about, you know, racism wouldn't die till it's not going to die till all the races die, because it's not true. Because it's not true. Because this age of colorblindness is just another act of racism. It's just another act of removing people's ethnography and their experiences. And I can't remove that and still look at you and then just say you're just human. So to your question, I just think that we really have to understand that time and you doing your part right now is what's going to make this in 50 years a whole different conversation. Marriage equality in 20 years is going to look like, oh, you're gay, you're getting married, and in 50 years, people will be like, duh, gay people should get married. You should. It's going to, the social consciousness is slowly being pushed. And I just think we just have to do our part when the door is open. You do you to the best of your ability.
So in all of that, there was a lot about kind of support. And so the next question I'm getting is, how do we as Black gay men support one another in coming out and being comfortable about your sexual orientation? So speaking out, not just, as we said earlier, about status, but we have to speak out about like who we are as Black gay men. So how do we make it comfortable to come out? For those who have a coming out story, I actually don't have a coming out story.
So my dad, who may be watching,
he gave me the best coming out experience of my life. I think I told him before I told my mom. And it was a conversation that went like this, like, Daddy, I met this guy, he's really nice, he's really funny, he's so sweet. And yeah, then he asked me, and this was like 3 years ago, he asked me would I date him, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then my dad just got really quiet. I just kept talking like, yeah, but he's really nice, Dad. And then my dad said, son, did you just come out? I said, huh? He said, I'm so happy for you. So what I would say about coming out is that there is a risk in it. Patrick Ian Pope wrote in the movie, the Noah's Ark movie, Jumping the Brood, there's a quote in there that Alex says to the young Black gay man who was sitting up around them at a table and said, oh my God, watching all these Black men who are wealthy and have jobs, I feel like I can come out, right? So even people seeing this discourse empowers people. And then Alex responded by saying, well, you know what? You can do that, but be prepared to make the decisions now for the world you inevitably want to live in. So be prepared to make the decisions now to create the world you inevitably want to live in. So even if you get rejected now, what are you trying to create? A world where you don't have to hide. A world where you can be yourself. Well, I'm not judged by the character of my skin or the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. I'm trying to create that, and by any means necessary, that's the world I want to live in. So there is risk involved.
Well, my story is a little different. So my dad is a Southern Baptist minister, and I wouldn't consider myself as actually coming out. I was pushed out. But what made it most difficult for me is the fact that with growing up in the church and my dad being a pastor, I was told that I'm going to hell or something is wrong with me. And I was taught that even anytime I go through any issues that I feel like I can't handle, I should turn to religion or church. But receiving backlash from church and my dad, who's a minister, it it makes that it makes that experience much more difficult. And I feel like that creates a lot of barriers as far as what decisions we make in our health, how we treat other people, how we conduct ourselves, how we act towards other people. And I feel like it just comes down to everyone needing a support system. Even though it wasn't my own family, it wasn't my dad, I had people that I could actually reach out to and depend on that helped me get through this experience so I wouldn't feel like I was doing it on my own. And once they kind of helped me to elevate to the next level and get comfortable with my sexuality, and once I started to build my own relationship, and with God, I'm just going to say it, I started to feel more empowered. I started to have more confidence. I started to speak out more. I started to get involved more. And even though I love my dad and his church, what they said started not to matter, or what they thought. That didn't matter anymore. It was just what I thought of myself. And when I learned to pull happiness from myself and kind of be a resource that I can depend on, I wouldn't have to leave my happiness or my well-being in the hands of someone else. I mean, and it's not always that easy because everyone has different circumstances. But I just feel like one thing that you really need is a support system so you won't feel like you're going through that alone.
So I am going to say, I see the question from the audience. We're going to have to sort of keep our comments a little bit brief. We got a little bit of time. So let's take this question from the audience, that one, and then I have a question from the Twitter. And say your name, please.
My name is Frank. I want to ask you a question because I'm good at the same thing. It's not so much dealing with my parents and how they accept it, because the Bible says he who does sin cast for stone. So, mommy, dad, you can't come to me because I know you're going to live. But my question to you is, how is that relationship with God? Like, God says it's a sin in the Bible, but it's like, God, if this is how I feel towards him, what do I do? Like, God, like, you have to come in. Is this what, am I supposed to live like this? Am I supposed to, is this Satan coming in to try to destroy me, separate my life from you? Because parents, they're, whatever. But at the end of the day, God has the last decision. God is the last, he makes the final decision. He's a judge compared to Bill Left Joe. Yes.
Do you want to respond to that?
Okay, that's just me specifically. Other people may feel with their issues, they may not include God, they may not be religious, but as far as I'm concerned, I was a lot younger. And I was going to church not because I wanted to go to church, but because my parents pushed me to go to church. So my relationship with God was through my parents. I didn't read the Bible for myself. I couldn't just call off religious quotes and stuff. What I knew and what I know was accepted and was unacceptable was through my parents' relationship with him, not my own relationship with him. So when I started to get to know him for myself, and I started to kind of build my own spiritual well-being, that's when I became more comfortable. It was times where, I didn't communicate with God, or it was times where I thought, well, maybe God doesn't exist. That's my own experience. Each person have their own personal experience, but like I said, when I started to do those things for myself and started to provide things for myself and learn things for myself instead of depending on other people to do it for me, that's when I felt most powerful, and that's that's when I gained the most confidence, and that's when I was most comfortable.
Gentlemen, you have a question?
Yeah, I know. Oftentimes we are the tools in which we deliver messages that are given to us for our community. And we give messages when we give messages, we put up signs, we have posters, and we bombard and saturate our communities with these messages and posters. But there is a point where a message can become so loose that you get pushback. That people say, well, here is this message, I'm going to do it. Do you think that we're in a point now where we have oversaturated our community?
So I'm going to respond really briefly. Yes and no. I think to what Darwin said earlier, the right message is not getting out. So we keep talking about the same things and we keep talking about test. And at some point, there is pushback to testing because we hear it constantly. I think we as he said, need to tailor our message to the community that we really want to reach. And so if it's the pigs, then let's figure out what they like and what they enjoy, and let's figure out how to talk to them. And if it's the bears, and if it's the blacks and the Latinos, the lovely boys, and let's figure it out. But everyone has to have their own message.
I mean, I think Blake answered that question as well, but I just want to say at the end of the day, we have to look at this. Black MSM are still getting affected. And so because they're still getting affected, there's still work for us to do. And so whatever that work is, whether it's telling them to use a condom, whether it's testing, whether it's PrEP, whether it's PEP, I think we still have to educate the community. And so it's how you deliver those messages. If it's, like my brother said, it's being sexy using a condom, maybe I'm going to put a condom over my mouth. You know, give them the tools necessary in the tool belt where they can be sexy with these messages or be sexy with their prevention messages. But we cannot, in this, as providers, we cannot say on Tuesday, you know what, I'm tired of talking about this, ain't no one listening, and then I'm gonna start talking about it on Friday. We have to continue this message. We have to continue to blaze the path that our forefathers have provided for us in this fight.
So to switch gears a little bit, I want to start with a quote, and that is, I don't tell you you're ugly because you already know you're ugly. And that's shade. And so the question is throwing shade amongst ourselves keeping us from loving one another?
I would say yes, primarily because like inside of our organization, we promote brotherhood and things of that nature, but oftentimes people get so caught up into their feelings that they say things that are really, really harsh. Oh, sorry. They say things that are really, really harsh, and I tell them you're telling people stuff that could potentially scar them for the rest of their lives, but you want to keep this person around. And it's not making sense to me. It's like if we're going to help each other and support each other, it's like learning how to control ourselves and learn that anything that we say can make a difference in someone's life, and I may say something that can potentially destroy somebody.
Now, shade is emotional terrorism.
And I think shade is real. I think that, but one thing that we also have to look at is that when you think about someone personally throwing shade, is that there's some self-conflict that you're dealing with. There's some self-esteem, some emotional issues, and that you throw shade to kind of take those things away from yourself. So I'm going to shade at you because, you know, I didn't get over the fact that my nose is big. So let me talk about your issues, so I don't have to bring up my personal issues. So once you start loving yourself and you can understand that, hey, I have this and be okay with it, then maybe you won't throw shade. I mean, I think perhaps.
So shade is like a passive aggressive type of conversation that I try to stay away from, but I understand it's so embedded in our culture that we can say either you're shading or we're kikiing or we're carrying or, you know, I've heard people say some of the most deadliest things to each other, and I think what's happening is that it's making it harder and harder, which I think the question should be more for us to be vulnerable with our community because we've watched each other shade one another so much. We've seen people talk about people's status openly. We've watched them talk about, all their personal business out in public. And there's now a brewing growth of community distrust. And that's what shade, I feel like, is doing to the culture. And also, I want to kind of piggyback on Noel's question about, and I can't lie about, because Black and Sim are still being infected, have we failed? And part of me is livid because I'm saying in my head, we do not have outcome measurements in place to say we're going to control everybody's choices, and just because of condoms, everybody's going to be okay. Everybody's going to stay negative. That's not the way this field is set up. Unfair, unjustly, okay? I think for the question is that whether a person becomes positive or negative, we as social service advocates or providers, we're there. Because I feel like that question kind of reinforces that HIV is a death sentence idea. Because baby, we're on the cusp of a cure. We're on the cusp of a cure. We have the tools now to possibly end the HIV epidemic. It is coming. So if we're going to keep waiting for this idea that we're just keeping everybody negative and everybody's quote unquote good, that's not fair either. We're changing the conversation on the outcome. We're saying if you had sex in the last night and you came in to our clinic and it was unprotected and you think you're at risk, guess what? We got an outcome for you too, called PEP, right? Then if you feel like you don't want to use condoms, or you feel like you're allergic to condoms, guess what? We have another option for you. We have no expectations for our clients. And I think that's what keeps us balanced, is that we don't expect for our clients to do what we say to do. We try to give them the tools to empower themselves.
Thank you. Briefly, I do think shade is sort of keeping us from loving one another. I like what you said about it's keeping us from being vulnerable. However, I think that there's a special place in my heart for shade. I have my good friends and in my group of, Deshaun's and Daniels and Jonathan. We can throw shade amongst each other and it's all good, right? But shade has rules, and it's as long as you can sort of accept the fact that if I tell you what you said hurt me, we can modify how we throw shade. But the shade we throw sort of intra-community to the people that we don't know is the toxic shade. And so let's take a question from the audience. I see one right here from the good doctor.
Not really a question, just kind of a comment. Just kind of piggybacking on what you said. I think that there are like two types of shade. There's that type of shade that's really meant to cut someone. It's meant to be negative. It's meant to put them down. And there's the kind that's, like you said, between your friends where you're just making little jokes with each other that only you guys are really going to get anywhere. So I think there are those two different types, and I totally agree with Antoine that the negative type, and with everyone up there, that the negative type is definitely something that kind of keeps us from moving forward. So yeah, I think that's something that we have to find a way to end, but the vulnerability that we feel, that people feel, has to be addressed in order to get them not to throw shade at others.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience? I have a couple on my phone that want to be asked. I just want to make sure people are here. All right. So I have a question. It's kind of long, and it's how can you encourage Black gay men to get involved in their community to speak out not only about their sexuality and status, but feeling empowered? So that's a whole lot to unpack, right? So I'll say it again. How can you encourage Black gay men to get involved in their community to speak out not only about their sexuality and status, but also generally about feeling empowered?
I would say a great start would be for us to be the change that we want to see. Often growing up, I feel that I lack individuals to show me what it's like to be successful and to be gay and to be Black. Moving to Atlanta allowed me that opportunity to feel more comfortable with my lifestyle and see that there's people that's gay that make more money than people that aren't. And they're gay, and they're in business, and that's okay, and it's all right, it's fine. So being being the change that we want to see and pretty much showing people that it's okay to come out and be gay.
Oh, my knees. So, I think that we have to build a sense of unity. No one wants to feel like they're doing the work on their own, and no one wants to feel like they're carrying the weight of everyone on their own. And I think, prime example, we was just talking about shade, and as I just noticed, I'm sorry, shade is probably one of the reasons why people don't get involved, is why people don't want to be a part of a certain organization or a certain entity or actually put themselves out there because they're afraid of, any type of negative backlash that they'll receive, or they're afraid of what people in their community or their church may think or their family may think. So we have to find a way to directly relate their work to their well-being. And we have to kind of show them how the success of the whole community lies in each personal decision that everyone makes. I mean, even though that's not an easy task, I think shade is one of the main reasons why people don't want to get involved in the community.
Sorry, I know it's not. We also have to be realistic. I mean, every black person that goes to the march on Washington. Some people say, okay, so we can't expect everybody to take up arms for our cause because we understand the importance of our cause. We have to understand that everybody is not going to be gun for about this cause. So we have to accept that when we go to people, we can't like bash them over the head when they don't want to pick up arms for the cause because we think. We have to say, well, hey, and maybe you can do what you can from the house. Everybody ain't gonna watch, but some people gonna have to hold the
So you want to respond to that?
Yes.
Briefly.
I agree with that. Like, I know some people who aren't very fond of coming to conferences or being in this environment or being in this type of environment with a lot of gay men at one time, just from internalized issues or whatever, but they could still contribute. It doesn't mean that they can't help the cause or contribute to the cause. So I definitely agree with you.
So I will say one good way that I think a lot of young black gay men particularly get involved in. Daniel mentioned he's a graduate of the Crip Fellowship. I also am a graduate of the Crip Fellowship. It happens at NASM. I encourage you all, if you're interested, and I think under 26, 25, and Darwin also is at NASM, so you can talk to him about it afterwards. Apply. It's a wonderful sort of way to get involved, to network, to start doing things locally, regionally, nationally, and sort of whatever it is you want to do. Crip is amazing for that. So in closing, what I want to do is sort of open it up to the panel to ask any or have any last closing remarks. Keep them brief. We're almost done. And then I'll have the last word and we can head out of here. So I will turn it to Brandon.
I would like to close out just saying thanks for the opportunity to allow me to be up here. Thanks to the Red Door Foundation, and I've really enjoyed this experience. And like I said before, we have to love ourselves in order for other people to start. It's like, how do you expect people to start embracing us and accepting us if we won't accept ourselves? So working on our wellness and getting more interactive with our community, and then if we do it, we can pressure other people to do it. But if we don't, or we can persuade other people, but if we don't, then we can't expect other people to jump behind the cause that we want.
Once again, thank you, Marvell, for this opportunity to speak and give some of my crazy thoughts and ideas. Just a couple of plugs for myself. Follow me on Instagram, BlueSwag5, Twitter, BlueSwag5. Registration for the NASM conference is open, $275 until July 31st. But in all honesty, I think one of the things that I want you guys to leave here with is that I think that, I want to say Noel, his quest really made me really think that we have to, or maybe it wasn't, I'm not sure. We have to really think about our work and really understand that we got into prevention. It is a paycheck for most of us, but we got into prevention for personal reasons. So once you take, if you're really, really passionate about prevention, once you take the dollar figures out and understand paying your rent, those types of things, and this is something that you really, really want to do, then do it. I mean, I think that it's more than just a paycheck. And so while people are still getting infected, we have a lot of work to do. And if it's going to be a 9 to 5 for you, then it may not be something that you need to do.
So crazy. Shade, right? Just to reiterate, thank you, Marvell. Marvell is someone who I applaud and admire, being both native Memphians, and I certainly challenge the city of Memphis to find ways to be open to the conversation around sexuality, self, and whose responsibility it is. In closing, the thing that always stands out to me the most is that there is a really interesting intersection between the sexuality and the spirituality, right? Sexuality and spirituality, they collide, they bump against each other. And sometimes I may love God, but I don't love what I do. And that's what I heard. And I always find it to be the point where in the bedroom, that's the thought that puts people at risk. Because what you toxically believe doesn't play out in public. It doesn't play out in church. But when you get in the bedroom, internalize condemnation, internalize homophobia, it plays out. Why you can't keep relationships together? Because when you look at that person, you really hate them because you say loving you is sending me to hell. Those beliefs cannot be healthy. And I think as we are evolving and negotiating that, we do have to start negotiating how we look at the Bible, and how we value it, and how we call it infallible, because when you look at it in time, it's full of errors, it's full of misperceptions, and guess what's also full of love. And at the end of the day, there's nothing that can separate you from the love of God. Nothing.
Well, I just would like to thank everyone for attending the panel discussion and everything. And I would like to close by challenging you guys to have these conversations with your family members, with your loved ones, with your friends, your coworkers, just as easy as we sat here and discussed these things. I know people may not be as open to conversing with you about these, but we have to kind of push the envelope, you know. And nothing will get done unless we continue to take the initiative to start these organizations, to have these conversations, to kind of open people's minds to the possibilities of what could be instead of what is. So, like I said, in closing, I really appreciate all of you guys for being here.
And so I'll first say to respond to quote Michelle Allen, I ain't getting to public health because I thought I was gonna ball out, right? Like this is hard work. And to segue, like this shit is hard. Like it's emotionally draining, it's physically draining. Make sure you always take time to sort of check yourself in and out. Take moments for yourself. It's difficult work, but it's work that has to be done if we want to save our community, if we want to save ourselves. So with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank those who participated online. Thank you to the panel. Please follow them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Talk to them while they're still here. And we can definitely continue the dialogue using hashtag SOS 2014 and hashtag Speak Out. So thank you also to Speak Out and Greater Than AIDS. And also, as we've all said, a special thanks to the Red Door Foundation for hosting this and the panelists and all of their insights. So please give Marvell Terry a round of applause. And then if you want more information about the Red Door Foundation, please visit it at trdfmemphis.com. And I will give, Marvell, do you have any last kind of thoughts and concerns? With that, you all, I entreat you to have a wonderful and blessed evening. Please libate yourselves if you so choose. And always remember, have fun, be safe, use condom, use PrEP, you do whatever you gotta do, but use your brain. Can you join?